This hybrid meeting is being recorded and may be accessed by WebEx. The meeting link is on the calendar at burlington.org. All members are here tonight, so we don't need roll call votes. If connectivity is lost and we have a quorum, which we do, the meeting will continue. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, stands under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The approval of the minutes from our last meeting on January 28th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any question, comment? Yes, Jeremy.
Comment on the long-term budget plan. I think we need to amend it and say we provided additional guidance, not that it was opposed, and I'd still like to have a vote on it.
I've got to see what the minutes say. Hang on. Minutes. Oops. Okay, which item is it?
It was the...
The second reading, or no, what was it?
It was the long-term capital plan, the very last one before old business, new business.
Okay, Mr. Cuna explained the long-term capital budget plan. The first 10 years look similar as the town 10-year. What do you want to add to that?
Basically, there was additional guidance given for dollar spending thresholds to bring it out to 20. And then that we're going to, this wording makes it sound like we're tabling it, and I don't feel like we are, or I don't feel like it's been brought through to completion yet.
No, you'll see it next meeting with the capital warrants. Correct, Bob?
25th, yep.
Okay.
So do you still want language added to this?
No, that's fine. If we're going to bring it to the next meeting, I wasn't aware.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's 5-0. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public participation. I don't see anyone here for that. The next item is a student report. Rashida?
Okay, so for the executive board, we have a plenary session this Thursday. I guess that's actually everyone. We also have the Massachusetts Student Government Day on April 4th coming up at the State House in Boston. So we have to choose 2 juniors to represent us soon. For the class of 2025, they're reaching out to local businesses for donations, and they're budgeting and planning prices for prom, and they're waiting for their final babysitting night in March to be approved. And then the class of 2026 are working on a school-wide dance for all grades on March 14th. And so they split into groups to decide like activities, chaperones, foods, drinks. And then the class of 2027 is doing a fundraiser with the world's finest chocolate. And so they're looking for approval to see if they can sell it in school, and then if not, they're gonna do it outside of school, and they're planning for a semi with the freshmen. And then the class of 2028 are doing a restaurant fundraiser, and they don't know whether it's gonna be Chipotle or Panera yet, but they're talking about that, and they're doing semi for May 16th right now. And that's it.
And that's it. Any questions? Any comments?
Any news for us?
Not since the last time.
All right.
Getting impatient, you know. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Subcommittee reports. Does anyone have a subcommittee report they'd like to talk about?
Sure I do.
Oh, go ahead.
So Recreation Commission last night, of note, people that are interested, the program is being finalized, should hopefully be published end of February with enrollment beginning, geez, let me get this wrong, first week or second week of March, so right there, so it's going to be a pretty tight turn on that. Also, too, for the March assignments field committee, The engineering firm has filed their letter of intent. We have a appearance before the Conservation Commission this week. And we also have finalized letter of butters. That should go out shortly. So butters should be seeing that. Right now, by all estimates from the team, the project is on schedule and on budget.
Go ahead.
Jeremy, that's the spring brochure we're talking about, March?
Correct.
Okay.
Spring brochure.
Any inkling of the timing of the summer brochure?
No, but I will certainly take that back and ask. I know that's a high interest item. We just
Yes.
didn't talk about it last night.
Okay.
Any other questions? So, Jeremy, when do you expect the work to actually begin on the backfield?
So we would like to, assuming, and again, this is an assumption, so assuming we go to conservation, we gather their inputs, planning board, get their inputs, we'd like to go out to bid at the beginning of March, so the first week of March, with construction to start April, May, was it? Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
And targeting for an opening end of August, beginning of September, to coincide with, school opening.
Excellent. Okay, are there any other subcommittee reports? Nope. Got anything for us, Cheyenne?
Thank you. No, Ways and Means, there's nothing to report at this time. We have a meeting next Wednesday, 19, Town Hall, 7 PM. Anybody's welcome to come.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Other announcements, Dr. Conti, anything?
No, ma'am.
I had two,
Go
if I
ahead.
may.
Sure.
I received two records from our student athletes. Shay Woodbury broke the 100-yard backstroke record from 2023 in swimming. He also broke his own BHS record from last year. And then also we had Lauren Scalia. She did the most saves in the game by a field hockey goalie, and I believe that was number 2 in the state of Massachusetts. So some awesome moves by our athletes.
That's great.
Great news.
Thank you for those. Anyone else? No? Learning, Equity, and Thriving. Literacy Leadership Task Force update. That must be you, Lisa.
Yep, but thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I want to highlight the effort that Dr. Chen has put in with a bunch of our educators and principals, and they've just put in a tremendous amount of time and work, and she's going to be speaking to you quite a bit tonight about that. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Chen. We're also joined by Dr. Gail Levette from Charlottesville, who is snowed in. So Dr. Levette, thank you for joining us remotely.
And also, thank you so much. And at the same time, I'd also like to thank Dr. Bonnie Nichols, who is online with us, and also Mr. Sean Musselman, who is sitting here, who can come up here with me if you would like, because you've been part of all these wonderful.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Come on here, young man. Sit right next to me. All right.
Just taking orders from my boss here.
Sir. All right. I think Dr. Levette, could you please take us forward with where we are, and I will jump in at any point in time, okay?
Yes, perfect. And Bob and I are going to work together on advancing the slides. Like Dr. Conti said, we have about 8 inches of snow, and school is already closed for the next 2 days. So that is snow in Virginia. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Thank you for having me virtually. Next slide. So we are here to talk about the Literacy Leadership Task Force, which came out of the recommendations from the pre-K through 12 literacy review that was completed at the end of last year. And one of the main recommendations was ensuring effective Tier 1 core grade level instruction. And so that came out to adopt a comprehensive core K-8 curriculum. Next slide. So as you can see, we are deep in year 2 here of a 4-year plan. Next. You'll hear us talk a lot about English language arts, ELA, And that's really an umbrella term for all things that are related to literacy. So that includes reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So tonight when we're talking about an ELA Tier 1 core curriculum, we are talking about encompassing all of those things. So we formed, in order to go about the process of looking at and adopting a K-8 core curriculum program in ELA, we adapted a selection process from EdReports, and we started by establishing the process. So that was our first step. Next slide. As Dr. Conti and Dr. Nichols will point out, that was the formation of the Literacy Leadership Task Force. There are over 37 members of this task force. They are from all 4 elementary schools, MSMS, central office. There's coaches in there. Sean is a member. And so these folks have done and are continuing to do very, very important work.
Members of this committee coming together, because as you look at members of this committee, you also see people in there also from the high school. And so what we are doing is not just K through 8, it's really taking a hard look at what is our literacy program going to be looking from K through 12, and really want to thank both Sita Dervasalak, who is our DEI coach from the middle school, and also Shannon Janovitz, who has joined us for every single meeting, who is also the DEI coach from the high school, to learn what are we doing at the elementary and middle school so we can continue to bring on that vertical alignment that is so important when it comes to a curriculum adoption program.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. They've been such great additions. Next slide. There you go. So we came together using our core values as a task force around this shared goal. And actually, we built upon this goal. So you'll see the blue highlighted here are things that we added as we continued to go through the process. I'll give you a second to read it. Okay, next slide. So our main focus and goal is to deeply investigate ELA curricular programs and consider them for adoption, and also consider implementation. No curricular program is going to be perfect. And it's also important to note that a program is an important piece of a curriculum, but it doesn't comprise the whole curriculum. An important thing, an important asset that BPS brings is its incredibly dedicated, experienced, and engaged teachers. So we wanted to build on that expertise through the implementation of high quality curricular materials that will allow all of our teachers to share a common language. And one way to do that is through the adoption of a purposefully and thoughtfully sequenced scope, both in foundational skills. So you'll see that as the word recognition strand in the reading rope in front of you. That's the implementation of a structured literacy approach with explicit, systematic, sequential phonics instruction. But research is also showing, and has repeatedly showed, that the curriculum must also build deep content knowledge through reading and sharing in grade level texts. And you'll see that in the language comprehension side of the reading rope. So the use of a comprehensive ELA program can allow for alignment across grade levels. And you'll see we've been very busy. Today we just completed our 8th meeting all together, and the task force has been working both together and independently as well throughout this time. We have 2 more meetings, and then we'll have a final presentation and report for the school committee on all of our work. And it's important to note that our task force has also been incredibly nimble, incredibly responsive. We've adjusted this timeline based on feedback to allow more time for educators to deeply explore the programs. So that leads us to our second step, which is to develop our lens. So all of the curricular programs that we looked at and explored are all reviewed by EdReports. EdReports is a completely independent review that's educator-led, and they develop teams and rubrics and evidence guides for high-quality instructional materials. They go through rigorous reviews. They also allow for publishers to respond to the reviews that they send out, and they release reports that are freely accessible. And one important piece of an EdReports report on an ELA program is the incorporation of principles of structured literacy. So we use the EdReports lens. And then we also used Curate, which is, as they say, by Massachusetts educators for Massachusetts educators through DESE. And so once a program has been reviewed and meets approval from EdReports, the Curate will have teams of teachers who are implementing the program review it. So Curate uses two lenses. One is alignment to the standards, the DESE frameworks, and then also classroom application. So the teachers are using the curricula, they're reviewing the application part of the curriculum. So those were our two lenses that we used. And so that led us to our third step, which is to deeply investigate our choices. So I want to be really clear, I am not affiliated with any of these curricular programs. I recommended these in the literacy review because I have experience with districts across the country that have successfully implemented them as their core ELA program. All four of these have a research base and implement foundational skills along with that deep content knowledge. So investigating four is a big task. So we formed subcommittees within our task force, and they deeply reviewed the curricula that they were assigned to, and then became experts in that curricula for the rest of the task force. We also didn't limit the review just to the subcommittee, so anyone on the task force could explore the materials. In fact, we encouraged them to share out with the teachers in their school. And then we collected the subcommittee and also anyone who had reviewed the programs, we collected their feedback about each of the programs. So that led us to step 4. So in our December 5th meeting, we came together and narrowed to 2 programs to present out to BPS stakeholders for their feedback. And those 2 programs were Amplify CKLA and ELA, which is K-8, and then Wit and Wisdom K-8. And it was recommended by great minds who publish Wit and Wisdom that we explore really great reading along with that, which is the foundational skills piece. Both have been positively reviewed by EdReports and by Curate. We will put together a final report. I know these are a lot of words on a slide right now, so this will all be available to you. It's a lot to read right now, but what you'll see is, according to the DESE dashboard, these are the districts within Massachusetts that are implementing CKLA or ELA that are both under the Amplify umbrella. The ones with asterisks are implementing K-8. And then the highlighted ones are ones that we had plans to visit. The same for Wit and Wisdom as well.
And then the one thing that I also want to add is that while we're doing these particular curriculum reviews, other communities very comparable to us, like Andover and also Lexington, are also going on site visits. In fact, right, you were on a site visit today with Lexington. So they're also at the same time looking at the similar curriculums that we are looking at in greater depth.
Thank you, Lisa. So in order to take our stakeholder feedback, we collected it across different ways. So this is a huge nod to Dr. Nichols for coordinating a lot of this work with not only the reps, but also the site visits, reminding teachers, answering questions. So we collected feedback across several different ways, as we'll get into in a second. One was we had reps come. So they came to the schools. You'll see there was some visits in December and some visits in January from reps from each of the two programs, and they were in the buildings. They could answer questions. They could show teachers around the materials and the resources. And then there were also site visits. Bonnie had some additional site visits, but for last week, but they were unfortunately canceled because of weather. But what's really important to note is these site visits, these are all the people who went on site visits, and they brought back a lot of feedback from seeing it in action, from talking to teachers implementing, from talking to district leaders. And they shared out a lot of that today. And they spent a lot of time talking with teachers about the implementation. And then we'll include all these data for you in a final report, but I just wanted to give a brief, very brief overview, sort of a bird's eye view. We had a survey that went out to all BPS educators, K-12. We included resources, both online and in the buildings, for them to look through all of the materials. And that survey ran from December 6th all the way until noon today, so it's hot off the presses. On February 11th, Lisa did a great job of reminding folks, Bonnie did a great job of reminding folks that their input is very, very valued in this. And so once they were able to explore either the resources in their buildings, speak with people on the task force, go on site visits, explore the resources online, we asked them to complete this survey. There was a really good mix in the survey across all five schools, and also a good mix of classroom teachers and ESOL teachers and reading specialists and district level folks within our survey. So a couple of takeaways. When we asked all the respondents, everyone who participated, to rank their first choice of K-8 ELA programs, it is very tight, as you can see there. It's almost 50-50 between Amplify and Wit and Wisdom. When we looked closer at the data, and the task force did this today, they had access to all the survey data. When we really drilled in and looked at the classroom teachers, the folks who would be on the front lines implementing it, you'll see here that about 2/3 ranked Amplify CKLA as their first choice in K2. And then our classroom teachers in grades 3 through 5, also the majority ranked Amplify as their first choice. We also collected feedback from our families. We had a literacy night. We had reps present during that. After that literacy night, there were emails sent out. There was a site with online resources. This was all translated through Parent Square. We had copies, physical copies of each program at each school and in the central office. And also each of the programs provided online resources as well that were translated into several languages in the case of Wit and Wisdom, and Spanish in Amplify. And so we sent out a survey for our families. It was translated to complete as well. So that ran from December 11th to January 21st. A quick note about the literacy night. Doctors Chen, Nichols, and myself all presented information about not only the two programs, but about what was going on in terms of literacy assessments, and helped the parents learn more about science of reading. And we also presented the work we were doing in the task force. Translation services were there. The evening was recorded by BCAT. And like I said, reps from each program were in the lobby. And we had a couple of folks join us from school committee as well. So that leads us to our final step. We're almost done with our work, not quite, but close, in recommending a final program. So one of the resources we've been using is through Ed Reports, and it's a curriculum support guide. And we referenced and talked to the committee today about how we were going to make this decision. Consensus, as you can see where the arrow is, takes a bit of time, but it has a lot of engagement and investment. And so we came together and we considered all inputs, all feedback to come to a consensus. It's also really important that we consider the implementation needs for this rollout. And so when we're looking at this axis here, this is going to be a high demand on our teachers. It's a whole new, either way, either curricular program is an entirely new way. So we know that it's high demand. So because of that, we also know we need to provide high support. And so we're going to be thinking, and we already started talking today, about implementation. This is another way to look at that axis. When we have something that's really high demand, we want it to also be able to provide high support so that it's happening with our educators and not to our educators, which would be high demand and low support.
And so today, and Mr. Musselman was also there as well too in that meeting, we talked about what might implementation look like. We talked about, is this going to be a full implementation of K through 8, or are we going to go through it more in phases? And in speaking with Principal McMahon and also with the English teachers at the middle school, they have requested that they, especially with the math implementation going on, that they're asking please for just another year to do a little bit more research on what would best fit the middle school. But for next year in 25-26, as they're doing a little bit more research on wit and wisdom, CKLA or Amplify ELA, or even L, one of the things that they are going to be going through is professional development when it comes to the science of reading. We've started to take a look at some of professional development cohorts, such as Hills for Literacy. We're also taking a look at implementing some writing revolution there as well, too, for grammar and also for writing, based on the data that we've seen. But during this time, as they're receiving professional development on more structured literacy, on writing and grammar, the middle school teachers will also be taking a look at 3 particular curriculums. Again, there will be wit and wisdom, they will be Amplify ELA and L. And so what we talked about was with the K through 5 folks, again, did they consider full implementation, partial rollout? And what we learned from both the feedback from our teachers and those, I would say, on the committee, they were looking for a full rollout, which is K through 5. And we talked about, I would say, what were some of the similarities and differences between the 2 programs. We talked about what would be in the best interest of our kids. We talked about in our site visits where they saw a lot of student engagement when it came both to our special education students, our students who needed to be pushed a little bit more because they need a little bit more rigor. We looked at where writing would be implemented at best. And we shared bits and pieces from our site visit. And you've been on every single site visit, what I appreciate.
I missed Saugus.
Oh, you missed Saugus, sorry. That was the only one he missed, but he went to every single one. And where we landed was,
Next slide.
Amplify CKLA. And this was through consensus. And Sean and I have already started to talk about this. We've already started to talk about this. Even today, we're beginning to have conversations with our principals about this. The one thing about this program that we need to know is that in kindergarten all the way to third grade, it requires a 2-hour literacy block. 2 hours. For this program to be done with fidelity, you cannot do 90 minutes. You cannot do 60 minutes. For it to be done how it needs to be done with the phonics, with the first part of the rope, in order to get the strength when it comes to that part of word recognition, that type of getting kids where they need to come with letter recognition, it needs to be 2 hours. And so one of the things that we begin to talk about is what that might look like in our present elementary schedule, that our elementary schedules would have to be more consistent and more aligned. And we started to talk with Sean and get his ideas about what it might look like with both science and social studies. And is there anything that you'd like to add about what you've seen with CKLA? Because you're very much part of this process.
Yeah. I just want to add, I just want to say, like, the data, I want to go back just to that. We don't need to scroll or anything, but back to that chart about a seemingly split in our educators. And I think that acknowledges, one, like the diversity of opinions and like strong feelings that our educators have about, one model of teaching or another. And also that, both of these programs do have a lot of strengths, but they also have some things that educators are identifying as something that we're going to have to work on collaboratively together to kind of iron out to make it the best that it can for our Burlington students. And so, when we do talk about schedules, whether it's the length of a daily schedule or what a calendar year looks like and where professional development is embedded in that, our educators are very aware that that time is going to be important, that it's going to need to be more than what currently exists in order for this to feel as a rollout that is a with and not a to, right? That's that. And we want to empower our educators. We don't want this to be a point of anxiety. We know there will be some anxiety that is associated with change in general, but we're going to, our educators are professionals. They understand that exists. They're going to work through that. But we really need to make sure that we're doing the most to empower them and give them opportunity, give them leadership opportunities. I know Dr. Chen and Dr. Conti are going to be talking more about that. I know Dr. Nichols has been involved in that. And I'm just eager to see this work and support this work in the many hats that I wear.
And I would say that what I heard mostly from the K through 2 teachers, that they were very excited to have like a literacy block that's going to be 2 hours. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of good work that can be done during that time. And the principals are also aware, and I think that they're ready to roll up their sleeves and get started. And with both the curriculums, we started to take a look and talk to both companies, and we will be able to get some of the packages or at least some of the materials on hand so that we can begin looking at in April, a little bit of April, May, and June, some of it, and just begin to test some of it out even more so. And then we've already started to think about an implementation plan, which involves, again, as Sean has said, having educators. It's going to be through a stipend, working with an implementation team that is encouraging teacher leaders to take another role, another step. They're going to be a part of taking a look at the curriculum ahead of the time, helping to develop the pacing guide over the summertime, so that when we come back to school, teachers, we will be planning things out about 8 weeks in advance. We have started to talk about and think about what our professional development days are going to look like at the district level, so that it will be geared for a couple of years with a focus on literacy. And so it's just exciting times, and I cannot thank the task force enough, and I can't thank enough, again, the feedback that we received from a lot of the educators, because they wrote very thoughtful feedback when it came to specific needs that they needed, and we heard them very clearly about the implementation plan, being very clear about the roles and responsibility, and being very clear about the professional development that they needed. But I will tell you that in speaking with the teachers today, they are very excited about CKLA.
So we, just a quick note, we are looking at the third edition of CKLA, which is an iteration of the second edition that most schools are using. And so they've taken a lot of the feedback from schools that are implementing it and have streamlined and iterated it. So that's really exciting as well. So it is the third edition. And then the last slide is what's next for the Literacy Leadership Task Force. We have 2 more meetings coming up. We'll be meeting in 2 weeks to really talk through the implementation plan like Lisa talked about, develop success criteria for the implementation, start brainstorming questions teachers are gonna have, think about getting materials into teachers' hands and all of that professional learning. And then we'll meet on March 6th. I'll have a draft report that takes all of this information and puts it together, and that'll be presented to you on March 11th.
Okay, you ready for comments and questions?
We are. Thank you.
Okay, has anyone got any questions? Jeremy?
Just a couple questions. So the 100, I saw you said the 2 hours. So how does the 120-minute instruction block or 2 hours differ from the current block, and how are we going to mitigate impacts to adjacent core academics? So we've done this before. We shifted the schedule with some downstream impacts. So how are we going to mitigate those, and what are we looking at to help solve those proactively versus reactively?
I think through the chair, we're going to look at some of those options later in this meeting. And I think one thing about Amplify, if I'm speaking correctly, is they're teaching a lot of the other subjects through literacy or through a foundation of literacy. So I think the 2-hour block of time would include science instruction and social studies instruction. So it's we'll look at some models moving there, but I think there's certainly some ways that we can do that.
Sure. And then there's just the only other question I had was, so you said there was some kind of like an even split. I was just kind of curious on how we got over the split to get consensus, and then, items that you mentioned need to be smoothed out for implementation. I'd just like to hear more about that if you have some commentary you'd like to share. Either Dr. Chen or Mr. Musselman.
So I think we can both share. And Dr. Nichols, please join in at any point in time as well, too. And Dr. Levette, consensus doesn't necessarily mean majority.
Sure.
But it means that you are moving towards that. And I think one of the things that we saw in one of the graphs is that when you broke it down even more, the teachers who would be implementing it, 2/3 of them, K2 teachers, 2/3 of them said CKLA. And then the 3-5, and was it about, I don't want to mess up the math, Dr. Levette?
About
It was
40.
It was 60-40, right? And then today, after folks came back from the last site visit, we, on purpose, we had a math pilot. Remember that? You were joking about, we were counting out in sevens, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we separated each other into 7 different tables. And we had a series of questions that Dr. Levette had asked us, including to think about implementation. And then we had a series of questions that we jotted down. And from that, we all then had a spokesperson speak out. And how would you say that went as well, too? You took notes. I had to mediate, so please excuse me. How did that go? We can go table by table.
We went table by table. There were some tables that were still undecided, but many of the folks sitting at the table were leaning towards CKLA. We had one table that went fully for wit and wisdom, while we had 4 other tables that were fully for CKLA, and then we had 2 tables that were sort of split.
And so when we take that all into consideration, and we also take the feedback of our principals, we'll have to be leading this charge. The hard part is that you can't go wrong with both of these because they're both solid curriculums, right? But I think what I heard from the teachers, and please you chime in as well too, is what they really liked was the component of how they were thematic units, how science was embedded, how social studies was embedded, When we went on the site visit, I think what excited folks was seeing at this point in time kindergarten students writing whole sentences, students at the third grade level reading above grade level text, and the implementation of writing that was going on in every single classroom. And I think that that excitement is what I saw and heard from teachers. And what would you say that, some of the areas I think are always implementation, like looking and making sure that we're as smooth as we can through implementation.
Yeah, I think I'll just add this, like, I recognize again, like, the question, like, well, like, if it's a split, what are those, drawbacks or what have you? When I think about what consensus that I saw existed in the room, it was the consensus that this district, our faculty members, our community, I believe, really sees, especially after seeing these programs at work, the value in moving forward with a curriculum and acknowledging that 100% buy-in from everyone is not going to exist. But that rang through for me in the meeting, that people were eager and excited to see what they were seeing kids do. Some were more excited about other programs and their aspects than others. I not to throw her a curveball, but I would love to just kick this to Dr. Nichols, who's hanging over there. Dr. Nichols, would you like to add your own 2 cents on the matter, the meeting, the consensus, and your own feelings on where we are?
Sure, thank you. I think I think the site visits were huge. I think that seeing these choices in action really got folks excited, and it just seemed like there was a real excitement for CKLA, for seeing the skills and where students were at, and they were comparing sort of some of their own practices and where kids are at with foundations versus where kids were at with their CKLA programming. So I think the site visits were critical, and we got some amazing feedback from them.
And I think what it also allowed our teachers to do is also allow teachers to ask more of the personal questions about implementation. Some of these, a lot of these places we saw were in their third year of implementation, but they were very honest with us of what year one and what year two look like, right? And I think that what they heard is that one program, this is just a perception, one program was allowed the opportunity, they both allowed opportunity for you to have freedom. Let me say this, but one just seemed to have more scaffolding opportunities. So depending on if you came in, for instance, at the beginning of the year, if you're a first-year teacher versus a seasoned teacher, you would still have the opportunity to be able to pick up this program. And I think that the questions, because when you talk to a teacher who has been through it, I think that is what made it real for our teachers.
Okay, Megan?
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple questions. One of them is how much digital learning is going on. I remember when you did the presentation or review of our literacy program that it was discovered that students were on iPads maybe a little more often than we would like to see. So I want to make sure that we're not buying into another curriculum that puts us in that same place.
And Bonnie can chime in as well. So iPads are not a part, or digital is not a part of CKLA in the Tier 1 core program. There is an option for something called Boost Reading that is delivered through an iPad or a computer that is tailored for individual students that teachers can program in a lesson. That is ancillary to the instruction. So students are not, in K-5, are not going to be on iPads to receive any of the instruction. And Bonnie, you can correct me.
I think that feedback was on the math.
So there is a little distinguishing. So I believe at the middle school level, the Amplify CKLA has a little more of a digital aspect to that. I think that came out in some of the conversations we had with the middle school teachers. On the 3 site visits that I took, there was not a single minute that I witnessed a student on a device actually, whether necessary or optionally, for the process of facilitating the ELA curriculum. So there was a lot of writing, pencil on paper, right? Good old school, if you will, old school, new school, right? That's not changing, and as we know, there's great value to that, and I think that was something, again, we saw on both sides, like paper and pencil, and the teachers are in support of.
Okay, and so the Boost program, can you tell me more about that? Is that our Tier 2 instruction, Tier 3 instruction? What is I guess my real question is, what does Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction look like in CKLA?
So CKLA is Tier 1. Like all of the programs we looked at, that would be the grade level instruction that everyone receives in our MTSS in Tier 1. Burlington students in Tier 2 and Tier 3 will continue to get that intensive or targeted intervention that they need. In Tier 2, CKLA does have some additional support resources that teachers can use, but my recommendation would be that would be a team decision. That would be a decision that Bonnie would work with the reading specialists and the classroom teachers around. But again, this is just a Tier 1 looking at the grade level instruction for ELA.
Okay, so, I mean, I was under the impression that Tier 2 is grade level instruction. It's just more targeted instruction at grade level. So I'm not trying to look at this from a special education lens. I'm trying to look at this through hey, we have a struggling reader who has not yet qualified or may not qualify for an IEP. So what does that targeted intervention look like if we have somebody who's not in need of specialized services through an IEP, but is also below grade level in reading? What does that look like with this program?
Maybe Dr. Nichols, I'll defer to you, but I can also speak to just a personal vignette on this, like, if you'd prefer me. You know what the delay is? Anyway, so, I mean, I'll just say what I witnessed in one classroom that we were in. One classroom we were in where, you know, there were multiple tiers of students, right? You knew there's accommodations, there was an instructional aide in the class. When I looked around, as one does during a walkthrough, one can see some different kinds of scaffolds that exist, that take place in the space. Can see that, you know, there is an instructional aide and teachers kind of checking in with some students more than others. What I think is important to note here, and I think, again, why is there consensus around we want to move forward with a program, is that, you know, we were seeing all students in that room write with clear, like,
Sentence
clear
structure.
thinking.
Yep.
You know, I'm you know, what am I going for? It's not coming out, but it's
No,
coming out on the paper for me.
No, like there was
you know what
clear
I'm saying?
text.
Like
They were-
just getting it out.
They
Like
were
that's
doing conjunctions, they were doing subordinate clauses, they were reading, some of them were pulled into small groups, but they were all doing the grade level text.
cohesive. I'll put that in my own words of cohesive, detailed, you know, paragraph writing, which I think for everyone was, you know, a welcomed sight, seeing all students succeed, knowing that that group couldn't possibly be, you know, a homogeneous group sitting before us.
I think that's fantastic, and that is what I would like to see, you know, everybody working together in the same classroom, people on different levels, you know, learning together. But at the same time, I want to make sure that this program has support for students that need that extra support. And how does that look, I guess, is my question. You know, I know we're not changing classes for reading anymore, and I think that's fantastic, but how does it look with CKLA?
So I would say that we're going to still continue on with what we've been doing, which is through our DIBELS training, right? Using DIBELS, for instance. And we're going to take a look at, you know, how our students do, I think, with a stronger Tier 1 instruction. The hope is that you're going to have less students in Tier 2 and less students in Tier 3 over time. But I think they're going to be the same. Maybe there may be, I don't know if it's what you're looking for, Megan, is like a different program. It's not per se a program. We're just going to be using what has worked well in the past, right? We're going to be looking at the data. We're going to be using iReady. We're going to be using Dibbles. We're going to be monitoring the students. And then depending on what they need, we'll be supplementing that with either through small group instruction. It's going to be more frequent for students if need be. And it's going to be some grade level text. And I don't know if I explained it as clearly as I should have, but Dr. Levette, Dr. Nichols, please, what would you say? Because there are other pieces that we've been using for, I would say, for our Tier 2 and Tier 3. We're not changing necessarily things that have worked.
I would, and Bonnie, jump in. I don't want to be a road hog. I would agree. I think continuing to use Dibble's data to inform if a student, like Megan is saying, Tier 2 needs some strategic intervention, and we've been really doing that around fluency. That's been the focus with the classroom teachers doing some fluency work. That is very much a part of CKLA, so the students will, and the teachers will have access to passages that are grade level that they can scaffold with the student and continue that practice. So I can't imagine either of the curriculum or any program that would change the work that everyone has done around MTSS and around having, there's been a lot of work this year around providing Tier 2 to support to students and providing that intensive Tier 3 intervention to all students. This is, just like Lisa said, providing a very strong, effective Tier 1 so that all students are receiving grade level. And there are scaffolds that come with each of the grade level readings that teachers can utilize, whether it's pre-teaching vocabulary, whether it's taking a small group and rereading a passage together. That is all very well laid out in CKLA.
You got any more questions? Huh?
I'll pass the baton.
Okay.
I just had probably a straightforward question. So what I'm understanding is that we're implementing this K through 5 and taking another year at the middle school level?
Yes.
Okay.
Catherine?
He answered my question.
Okay. So my questions, comments will maybe sound a little bit like Megan's. I think this is great for Tier 1. It's, the nice thing about kids that don't have any issues learning to read is they can learn to read with just about any good, solid program. But this sounds dynamic and exciting, and that's great. I just want to tell you my concerns. I don't, you don't really need to necessarily answer them, but I'd like to tell you what they are. So I assume they'll have books.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if social studies is embedded, I assume that would be that so many of the lessons in this reading program are based on either history or geography or, but enough social studies will be embedded that they'll learn it in those 2 hours and they won't have another segment for social studies. Is that pretty much correct?
Again, we're still trying,
We're going to work on the scheduling pieces of that, but,
more to come.
but yes, but the content would be included in the literacy time that we were talking about.
Okay, so then we get to science. And science, the same way, although I think of science differently. You really learn social studies by reading about it and trying to remember it, which I was really awful at doing. Science, on the other hand, could be more hands-on. It's different. It's just different. And I'm concerned that we need enough science, and I hope we can get enough through this program. But then I'm worried about the kids in Tier 2 and Tier 3 learning, reading, that are they going to get enough social studies and enough science out of this program, which is really for Tier 1?
Tier 1's for everyone, though.
Yeah, okay. And so what else have I got here? I'm concerned about those students who need a lot of extra help, especially in grade 1 and grade 2, really getting reading under control. And while I think this is great, I'm all for it, I would like to see effort put into figuring out how to make things better for the kids that need extra programming or whatever. So I'm not trying to diss this in any way. I think it's great, but I am worried about the other kids.
I think we all share your worry.
Okay,
I
good.
mean, we always worry about our students who, right, present as needing more. It's inherent in
Or
us.
different, like what about the kids that are sort of dyslexic, and learn to read differently?
Of course.
How is this going to help them? It isn't, maybe.
Well, again, I think progress would define what it is that they need. If we're not seeing progress, remember, this isn't taking away the universal screening that's happening 3 times a year, nor the DIBELS, which is more of a progress monitoring tool. If we're not seeing growth, then we would change the tool so that we would see growth. I think, Gail, you told me at some point that the foundational research with Amplify has its foundation in
Orton Gillingham.
Orton Gillingham. So again, I think it's a branch of that. I think if a child needs what you and I have talked about for decades, Ms. Monaco, Linda Mood Bell, we have teachers trained in Linda Mood Bell. Bonnie, that training is that's speeding up, not slowing down. So our objective will be to provide the kid what they need when they need it, and we would see growth. And again, fitting that into a elementary schedule is always a challenge, but that's a challenge currently, and we'll continue to make that happen. But what's going to sort of drive the decisions about a child is going to be if they're making progress, and we are assessing them very regularly to make sure that we're seeing that progress. So we're not going to wait a year, we're not going to wait 2 years. We're really looking at progress monitoring can happen every...
2 weeks.
What?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. There we go.
So maybe this is for Bonnie. Bonnie, the teachers that are getting trained for Linda Mood, for instance, will they have enough opportunity to use it that they'll really be proficient? It's one of those things that the more you use it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, our teachers will still be able to use those sort of skills and instruments during their intervention wind block time. We've also been talking about looking at getting more letters training for all teachers universally to build that knowledge base and capacity so that they can work with all learners and really support all learners.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I have a question.
All right, Megan?
I want to piggyback on what you were just talking about. So, and I may have misunderstood this, but it sounds like if a student needs Seeing Stars or another program like a fantastic Linda Mood Bell program, it's going to happen at WIN, and it's not going to be happening in. I'm hearing it as if it's a program. Those programs are for students who have special education plans, and not students who are, who are in the 2-hour literacy block. So if my student is getting Orton Gillingham, or if they're getting Linda Mood Bell, are they getting it in the gen ed classroom, or are they only getting it when they're pulled out for WIN? Like, when is it feasible for this to happen? And when are we planning on students getting these alternate programs or supplementary services?
Through the chair, Mr. Wojcik, it's a really hard question to answer because we'd have to look at the schedule. So the schedule, the models that we're looking at maintain a intervention extension or a WIN block in them. So some of that may have to happen during that time, depending if they're still getting a full Tier 1 experience. Kids who are in Tier 3 may not get a Tier 1 experience, but Tier 2 might be a Tier 1 plus. So we'd have to make that schedule work. I want to say very sort of purposely, because this is always brought up, the tool needs to match the student's progress, not the disability. So if we are having, if a kid's going to benefit from a tool, we will apply that tool whether the label is there or not. So Yes, we have an obligation to provide specialized instruction. Obviously, you probably know that better than me. But if there is going to be progress made using, again, a particular intervention, then we'll try to apply that intervention. We're not going to wait for the diagnosis. That's that part of progress monitoring where we really want to catch that as early as possible. We want to disrupt the child's schedule as little as possible, but our days are fairly structured, so that would be something that we'd have to work out with the teacher team, with the parents. We'd sort of have to make that work, and when people are available to do that. The more people we have trained, I think that's sort of Bonnie's goal and Dr. Chen's goal, the more flexibility in scheduling that we have. So there's a sort of a self-interest trust to get more training for everybody so that it doesn't have to be sort of a pullout or a specialized break in the schedule. But again, we're not holding tools back based on a label of disability, which I think was something that has been out there, and it's just not something we practice.
Anyone else have a question?
I just have one follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just saw a lot of reading specialist names and special education teachers' names on part of your task force. So I assume that there's been a number of special education, tier 1, tier 2, input into this. So they're on board, or you want to provide feedback there that they've seen it.
They have seen it.
Yeah.
And it's been available at all schools. There's certain schools that have had faculty meetings about it. Good example, Memorial has talked about it quite often. Folks have had the opportunity, including parents, have come up here to take a look at the curriculum and to ask a whole bunch of questions. And I think one parent in particular was torn. She just kept on saying, I don't know, they both look so good. I like this, but I really like this. So I think we had two really good choices. And I think that I'm excited because the teachers are excited, and I just am excited about the prospects of what this can do for all students, especially when we have a little bit more time with K 1, 2, and 3, and when there is a very strong, robust Tier 1 instruction, because that is the foundation. You have to have that first, and then really, it really helps everything else.
Catherine?
No, I was just going to say that for me, it's hearing the excitement of the teachers liking the program, because, again, they were part of the process, and by having them be part of the process, I think it helps get the buy-in. And if you don't have buy-in from the people who are going to be using it, you might as well not even implement it. It becomes very difficult, because change is hard, right? So you have to have, so I'm really excited that you keep saying that the teachers really like this, and to me, I think that'll help the success of the program.
And I do just want to say, Mrs. Bond, that the teachers, obviously, again, experience a lot of anxiety around change, but are very grateful that over the past several weeks, between Dr. Nichols' coordination and also our administrators' flexibility and obviously understanding of the importance of this as well, have managed to wrangle time for them to leave their classrooms to visit these schools. I think that really did make a big difference in terms of giving teachers better sense of what these programs looked like, how they felt about these programs and prospective implementation, hearing from peers, other educators, big deal. So, I just want to acknowledge that with gratitude that our educators did get that opportunity.
One last question. This is a full-blown, you're not doing a pilot.
No, this is full-blown. And in fact, when I actually gave the option of, different implementation plans, it was unanimous from all the teachers that they wanted to roll with it starting next year, K through 5.
Okay, that sounds good. It sounds like a great program. One last final note is I think a lot of students that may need a little extra help are not necessarily on IEPs, and I hope that this program works out well for all of those students, as well as the ones that have special needs. Go ahead, Jeremy.
just one last alibi you made me think about with the implementation conversation. You mentioned in your briefing that, year 1, 2, and 3, you got perspective on how that looks. Did the teachers that you spoke to say in year 3, this program to them feels fully implemented? So I guess I'm just trying to understand how long the transition will take. Is it a 1 year, 2 year thing, or, in 3 years, we expect this to be fully implemented and we feel like we're going to be up to where we need to be for trainings and so on and so forth? And I know it's a little bit amorphous question, but what was the feedback they gave?
That was the consensus at the many schools that we visited. Again, I don't know if stroke of luck or just, the facts of sort of the Lucy Calkins movement that these districts, we're all in sort of third year, but like by and large, the educators in those rooms and the administrators said, yeah, that first year, right? We're just getting eyes on and we're trying things, and it feels a little more, you're working through the scripts, if you will, and doing the best you can to kind of keep afloat, but, right, like, we all know, you practice it, you do it once, you do it again, like, things become more fluid, things become second nature, you're able to work in more of those wrinkles, right, different accommodations and so forth. Yes, like, I think on the whole, we feel good about, 3 years, knowing that it's going to be a good fight for 3 years, but these districts are all saying that, yep, we feel fully on and we're seeing results. That speaks confidence.
And I would say that what we heard from all the districts is that they're seeing results. They're seeing big growth. And that was exciting for our teachers to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Levette. How are we in Virginia now? Is it 12 inches? Is it a foot? Is it a blizzard now? Has the
Through February.
Is it a state emergency? Have they closed down the state now?
State of emergency before it even snowed. School canceled yesterday at 1 o'clock before there was even a drop of snow 24 hours later.
And
Thank
again,
you for
Dr.
your
Nichols.
input, Dr. Levette. Thank you, Bonnie,
Thank you.
Dr. Nichols. It's always nice to have you present. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm going to stay up here for the
Yes.
second one, yes.
Okay, let's, I'm assuming this one is,
Math.
no, I mean, it's not as large a presentation, I'm assuming.
No, and I gave you my word, Madam Chair, that the journey to CARES would be less than 5 minutes, and I've been timing it. Okay, I have.
Right.
It's at 3:59 right now, okay?
Okay, thank you. Algebra 1 Task Force and Math Update.
All right. So if you could kindly click, please. All right. So as you know, that these were some of the statements that we first came up with, and I think that these are statements that the teachers came up with, and I'm really proud of them because this is a work of our pre-K through 12 teachers saying that these are the belief systems of what the math curriculum should look like. And as we continue to build these pathways, as we continue to take a look at textbooks, when we interact with children, these are the belief systems that we should have. Next, please. That being said, I want to pull back to where we are, and the reason why we're here is because last year we had hired a consultant who is internationally known for her work, and she did a report for us, and similar to Dr. Gail Levette, she will have a second iteration of the report to show our progress, and then finally, in her last year, a third reiteration. But this report, she took a look at our curriculum. She also visited, took a look at all of our data, took a look at observation data and qualitative data, visited classrooms, and compiled a report and looked at the latest research. That being said, she came up with some recommendations. Next, please. Those recommendations are that what is important is that clarity of roles and responsibilities, that we need to continue to work on structures and building our systems in place, particularly taking a look at our MTSS structure, but also at the same time taking keen look at where our vertical alignment and pathways are, because what we found out from this review is that early on, what was happening is that not all of our students, if they were placed in one particular math class, they remained on track. And that is not in accordance to our belief system. You should not be able to define where a child will be in third grade, what math he or she is going to end up taking at the high school. So that's where an area of interest is where we began, is to take a look at that particular pathway. One of the discoveries that we learned in doing the research is that we do have some students here in our school division, for instance, who are taking Algebra 1 and skipping Algebra 1 because they may need it earlier in order to do geometry honors. So one of the things that we said that we had to fix immediately is that we needed to make sure that every student had the opportunity not to take Algebra 1 from Russian Math or from some facility, but to take it from us, and that it be high quality. That being said, we put together a task force. It's in its second year. Next, please. And we came up with that our products for this year to be successful was to develop a pathway that would allow every BPS student to complete Algebra 1 and Geometry by 10th grade through classes taken in BPS during middle and high school. As part of our work, we are in the process of finalizing our course descriptions and our assessment documents. And for this year, we're going to be using the middle school textbook that we are to help write our particular curriculum. However, it doesn't mean that next year we're not going to, again, start looking at a process of, do we need a new textbook in the middle school? And then if we need a new textbook in the middle school, what is that going to look like in the elementary and possibly at the high school? And all of our writing will be done using an understanding by design process, and began that work by identifying what are the power standards from pre-K through 12. That means what are the essential standards that every child, doesn't matter if they're multilingual, if they're on a special education, if they're on an IEP, these are the standards that must be taught to every single child. They can get to them if we scaffold them, but every single child must have access to these standards. They are our non-negotiables. It starts in pre-K all the way to 12th grade. Next, please. That being said, we came up with a pathway. This was a pathway that would allow our students, for instance, in grade 6 to have multiple pathways to ensure that by either in grade 10, they will have completed either Algebra 1 or Geometry, so that depending on, it didn't matter who you are, you could take a high-level calculus math by the time you ended up being a senior, if not earlier, and you did not have to double up. Next, please. So one of the things that we started to take a look at, next slide, please, is that these pathways happen to all of the students. Next, we took a look at all the different pathways. Next, please. Next. Thank you. Next. Next. All right. And then we asked the question whether or not could we possibly slow down? And the answer is yes. And so these are the pathways if people wish to slow down. They could go from integrated 8. So there's a way, if people also felt as though they were moving too quickly, there is ways also that you could slow down and speed up. Next, please. So what is our current reality? Our current reality is that we need to take a look at, next please, where this might end up going in the future. So one of the things that we're starting to take a look at is, if we, for instance, do this in 8th grade, and then this is what happens in 9th grade, what are the things that we could propose in 10th grade? Is there an additional class that we could add, or is there a class that maybe we could reduce and then re-add again? Next, please. And so we talked about potentially, could there be an Algebra 1 and an Algebra Interventions class in grade 9? Now, these are still things that we're talking about in the task force. Nothing has been made up. A decision has been made up. What we have finalized is the pathway for grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. But we're starting to take a look at what this is going to look like in grade 9 and above. Next, please. Next, please. That being said, what I want to point to you here, and I apologize because it's easier for me to see here, is that one of the questions that was raised earlier to us was whether or not we had enough students, for instance. Thank you. And one of the things that we started to take a look at, when you take a look at the beginning of the year and then the middle of the year, when you take a look at our students, for instance, at the beginning of the year, okay, and this is what we identified as number sense in Algebra 1. So those are, clearly, those are what I would call, these are the strands, right, that are ready, that if you had these strands knocked down, you are above grade level in all test domains, basically, at this point in time, you could probably take, if you keep on progressing this way, an Algebra 1 course and easily a geometry course. Now, so this is the thing, now. But if you take a look at the number of students in grouping 5, and this comes in the iReady, in 6th grade, you already have, at the beginning of the year, 65 students who are above grade level in all of your test domains. These are going to be your 7th graders next year. You have 82 at the beginning of the school year. Now look how many you have in the middle of the school year. This is the good teaching that our middle school teachers are doing. So to the question about whether or not this particular pathway is going to impede our students and hold them back, the answer, if you take a look at the data, is absolutely not. It shows that our students need a bit more rigor, if anything, because right now you have 83 students, right now, and 83 students in the middle of the year in the iReady assessment that are, oops, can we go back? That are above grade level in at least all of the test domains. You have 112 in your middle of the year assessment for iReady that are above grade level in all test domains. You have 3 teachers in grade 7, grade 8, and in grade 6. Each of them teach about 25 students. So if I have 112, that's already like what? More than 3 classes. So there was a concern that if we did this pathway, we wouldn't have students. No, that's not what the data is showing. Again, when you take a look at who are the students who have already mastered this, we're talking late in the game mastered. At the beginning of the year, we had 15. Now we have about 28. These are kids that if I plopped them in right now in Algebra 1, plopped them in right now, 7th grade, they would be fine. They would be fine right now in Algebra 1. That being said, we also correlated this with our MCAS scores. Look at the number of students who are totally exceeding the scores and totally meeting the scores. So one of the criteria that we have to decide is, what is our cut level score going to be? And then when I take a look at, and I have the particular percentages here, of our students who are earning A's right now in mathematicals advanced class, they do it by trimester. They're not going to be done until, so I can pull another data set for you, around March 14th. But if you take a look at this already, what it shows me, based on the data, when I'm looking at data, is that in Math Advanced 7 right now, the beginning of the year, the end of first trimester 1, I had 83 students with A's, 23 students with B's, 1 with C. Math Advanced 8, 101 with A's and 10 with B's. And so sometimes the feedback that I will hear from parents is that it's not challenging enough. Well, we're going to address that next year by, we're going to be putting in two different pathways now that's going to help advance some kids, the kids who are ready. One is going to be a grade 7, all grade 8 standards, and then in grade 8, it's going to be all grade 8 standards and all Algebra 1 standards. So these are 3 particular data points: student grades, iReady assessments, and MCAS assessments telling us that our students have the capability to receive more rigorous classes in math in the middle school. This is what the data is pointing to me to. So yes, will we have enough students for these classes? The answer is yes. All right, that being said, we're in the process of developing course descriptions, which includes prerequisites and core requisites and course standards. We're continuing on, and the teachers right now at the middle school are working on developing the power, the supporting, and the remaining standards. One of the work that they're going to have to do over the summertime is to develop some common formative assessments, and they're going to also talk about the iReady alignment. We're going to also be talking about the textbook adoption proposal, but in speaking with Tim McMahon, he wanted the teachers to start working on these documents now during their department meetings, so that if they had any questions, they could, while the teachers were here and available at the high school, talk to some of the high school teachers that are already teaching some of the Algebra 1 courses so that they could share some of the materials together. So again, that vertical alignment. All right. There was another question that was asked of me about grades. And so these are the grades that have been pulled up. And now we're going to switch over to high school math. And these are the grades that I pulled up to see what was going on with regard to high school math. And I focused predominantly, just so that you know, on quarter one when it came to our Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry. But if you need from me later on to give you a breakdown of this, I can also give you a breakdown, but the colors are as you can see. So in quarter one, we had about 75 students, or 40.98% with A's. 59 students, or 32.24% with B's. 41 students, or 22.4% with C's, 6 with D's, and 2s with F's. Algebra 2, you had 90 students with A's, 57 with B's, 36 with C's, 17 with D's, and 2 with F's. Geometry, you had 71 with A's, 60 with B's, 49 with C's, 14 with D's, and 4 with F's. So when I had the question that was raised of me that, you know, Dr. Chen, are you seeing, excuse me, yes?
Is this honors or CP or combined?
This is combined, but it can also be broken down as well, too. But when I had the question that, for instance, that there was, like, all these students failing, I needed to see this. I needed to make sure that that wasn't the case. And then when I take a look at the students that I have, for instance, in Algebra 1, and this is quarter 2, I have 59 that are in A's, 69 that are B's, 37 that are C's, 13 that are D's, 5 that are F's. Algebra 2, 62 that are A's, 77 that are B's, 43 that are C's, 15 that are D's, 6 that are F's. Geometry, 74 that are A's, 75 that are B's, 34 that are C's, 9 that are D's, and 2 that are F's. And even if you were to look at AP Calculus AB, AP Calculus BC, when you take a look at AP Calculus BC, even in this graph, you don't see any students with C's, D's, or F's. And in AP Calculus AB, although I can't tell you specifically what those numbers are, you do not see that the majority of them have D's or F's. So this is the data that I look at when I'm looking at concerns that people are raising about, like, high school math, right? I have to go to the data, I have to take a look at it, I have to take a look at the particular assessments. The other thing that I've also, when Dr. Thunder, when she took a look at our curriculum, and she is known internationally for her expertise in math, and she also served as a researcher for the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. It's very hard to be a researcher. That means that you're top dog. You're basically pulling all the research for all the other researchers, you know, in the nation. She said that we were very rich when it came to programming, when it came to supports, but one of the things that we needed to do was better streamline it, and that's one of the things that we're trying to work when it comes to the task force. So what are the supports offered by BHS? They offer a Saturday enrichment program. I know that Mark Sullivan has put this out there. There's also offered at the BHS the conferencing with educators, FlexBlock, academic support centers, and peer tutoring. And this is the second time I've taken a look at some of the curriculum. I will have to say that, in particular, when it comes to Unit 6, I've looked at it twice, put it down, looked at it again. There is alignment. I've seen alignment. There is alignment when it comes to the exit tickets. There's alignment when it comes to the homework assignments. There's alignment when it comes to even the lessons that are done in a UBD format. I know that the high school, because of the NEASC accreditation that had begun many years ago, they had to do the format of understanding by design. And I know that that's an area that we're continuing to work on and refine. Now, our researcher, our outside consultant, who has no affiliation here at all with Burlington, she's someone from Virginia, no affiliation, and that gives, I would hope, a more unbiased look at it, is the areas, again, the recommendations of what we're tackling is, again, the vertical alignment, making sure that there's more vertical alignment. Now, she's going to put together a second report. One of the things that I've asked her, in case my eyes have missed something, is I've also asked her to take a look, and she will take a look at, she looked at the first Algebra 1 opt-out exam. I asked her way back when to take a look at it. It is in alignment to all the standards that are considered our power standards. And now that, because we have shown that Algebra 1 opt-out exam for our people who want to skip geometry and take that Algebra 1 opt-out exam, I've asked Katie Whitcomb also to ask Dr. Thunder to take a look at it for another pair of eyes. And one of the things that I will also ask Dr. Thunder to include as she begins to take a look at our work that we do with UBD, because that is curriculum writing, is I will ask her specifically to take a hard look at our high school and for her to give me her opinion about the high school to see if it in fact differs from what I'm seeing, just so that I can have an extra pair of eyes. But what I want to show you, and hopefully in the short presentation, is that I take things very seriously when someone says to me that there's this and there's this. And so all I can do is ask questions. I can look at the data that's been made available to me. I can ask parents to please call me so that I can know what the experience is, so I physically can ask the questions and ask them more detailed questions and do research. But I will tell you that at my level, thus far this year, I've had only 3 parents come to me about something about math. I haven't had what may be out there, which is 10 or 15 parents. I've had maybe 3 parents, and each of them have been some questions about what's going on here, Lisa, what's going on there. I show them the data, and the data kind of speaks for itself. So if you want me also to pull it also the differences between honors and Algebra 1, Algebra 2, that's very easy for me to do. I'm more than happy to do that, but I don't think it's going to make this much of a difference. So I don't see it as what I'm trying to say when it comes to this. And I will be very curious to see what Dr. Thunder has to say as well, too. But I am very excited because very excited about the work that we are going to be doing with the Algebra 1 Task Force, because what it will mean in the following year is that there are going to be 3 courses. There's going to be grade 8, there's going to be the grade 8 standards with the Algebra 1 standards, and then there's going to be pure Algebra 1 standards, like just pure one, completely jumping. So for those kids who are above and beyond, who can do grade 8, 7, and grade 8, and they don't need that supplemental, again, of the grade 8 plus Algebra 1, they can go immediately into Algebra 1. The only reason why we couldn't do it this year is because the grade 7 of where the advanced math ended up, they would have ended up at grade 7 and a half of grade 8, and that's not fair for our students for them to jump directly into Algebra 1. So we needed to scaffold it, and that's why that was put in this year.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Please don't. Melissa?
I think it's important for us to see those bar charts by honors versus CP. I would love to see, I don't think we need to display them publicly, but between teachers, see what kind of variation there is between specific classes. That's that on the high school. And then the other piece on the middle school trajectories, I know you and I spoke about this, but basically for a student that may miss the cutoff for one of the accelerated classes one year, but maybe wants to do work, et cetera, and hit the accelerated class the next year, which I think is the goal of these multiple entrance points.
Yes.
How are we supporting that student to make sure they don't actually fall behind in that window while they're trying? We have to accelerate them. We've talked about this in the past, right? They have to learn more and they have to learn faster to be able to make that next jump. So if they don't go into the accelerated class one year, but want to get into the accelerated class the next year, or decide halfway through, right? Like you saw how many kids jumped from beginning of year to middle of year. If they make that jump in the middle of the year, how are we, this is not a today answer, but how are we supporting those students with either T2 or however many interventions to kind of give them that last push so that at the end of the year they can jump into that next?
Well, I say right now, what's available now, and I spoke to Principal McMahon, and I'm sorry that sometimes I have to take off on and off my glasses. I'm still getting used to that. One day, I think it's trifocals that's coming, but I haven't gotten used to the thing yet, so excuse me for that. One thing that's made available already right now is that the teachers in the middle school are really good. They will come at the beginning of school or at the end of school, and they stay after to help these students. But one of the things that Principal McMahon has started to talk with Dr. Conti and me, and I'm very excited about this, is putting an intervention block in their schedule. And so that's almost like a rotation. I think he said that he was trying to do it 6 out of 10 days, is that the rotation. He would still have the SEL, the building block in there, but this would afford students the opportunity, if they needed to see teachers, to be able to see teachers without disrupting anything in their schedule. So I'm very excited about that, because that will give, because that hasn't existed in the middle school.
Any other questions?
My question again, and this is something I asked and kind of maybe, I don't know, it's off topic, but we had talked about the last meeting, the exams that are being written.
Yes.
And who's writing them.
Yes.
Right?
And
right.
And they are written, teachers, every summer, they revise their curriculum, and teachers who teach together, work together, and they write some common assessments, but they also, at the same time, if some teachers, I did ask the specific question, do not get to a certain, they tweak it. They tweak it. So they start with a starting point. They each write it, co-write it together, right? And then if they don't get as far, they tweak it.
So, in other words, you're saying, let's say there are 2 teachers who are working closely together.
Yes.
They write that exam together.
Or they write individually their formative assessments. They write individually their quizzes. But when it comes to bigger tests, they write it together. But they do it together because usually they are very much in sync with one another. But at the same time, let's say they don't get to that particular question, they're going to still be able to change it.
So I guess the question I'm saying is that this teacher maybe gets to that question in their class and teaches it.
Or gets to that standard. Or,
Right,
yes.
and this teacher doesn't.
They will
This teacher can remove that
Yes.
question.
Yes.
So that, okay,
Yes.
that's what again, because, again, I feel very strongly that, a teacher should be writing their own exam for their own class. And again, I get the collaboration and people working together as teams and whatever, but I want to make sure that they're tailoring it based on what they got to in their class. Because again, we all know that you're not always going to move at the same, so, you may be a little faster, someone may be a little slower, you catch up here, you get behind here, and it's just not right if the teachers aren't doing their own thing, I guess, is based on what they've taught.
And I completely agree with you, Mrs. Bond, and I did ask that question point blank of Mrs. Whitcomb, point blank, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
And she gave me specific examples of how certain teachers, when they co-write their things together, because it's good to share thoughts, right, to write things collaboratively. If someone doesn't get to an assessment or to that, they may be 1 week behind, for instance, because life happens, that happens. Sometimes you have different students in front of you, that part of the test is not put on there, that they do tweak it. That they have the authority to tweak it themselves.
Are there any other questions? My only comment is that I would like the same information that Melissa asked for. And I think that when you showed us the data from the high school, I think some of those students that are in the B and the C categories, or even the D categories, I think some of those students would do better if they had more access to extra help. That's it. So why don't we, go
Sorry,
ahead,
I just
Jeremy.
one question. I just want to touch on one of the points you brought up, maybe a clarifying question. So you mentioned that Dr. Thunder said we are programming rich, but we talked about streamlining. To that means we maybe offer too much programming. Is there a way to get to quicker alignment by trimming down the offering?
No, when I mean program rich is that we often we have a lot of like computer assistance programs, we have a lot of like auxiliary programs, and that we should streamline them better. That's what I mean, that we often, that instead of offering, it's not so much, and I may have said it incorrectly, that we offer like different apps, we offer different programs that maybe, I'll give you an example, that we may use iReady, we may also use iExcel, but there's no reason to use both.
Okay.
And that the focus really needs to be more so not relying on some of those computer programs. They're good for diagnostics, right? But not thing for teaching.
Okay, Catherine.
Just very quick, I know we talked about books, and I just want to make sure that, you know, that you had passed along our concern to make sure people all knew they had access to a solid book or access to a book online so they can look at the whole book and
Yes.
not just, all right, I just want to make sure that word got out.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to Journey to Cares.
Okay. And are you going to time me? please?
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Set it.
All right, let's set it.
Here.
All right, hold on.
15 seconds.
3, 4.
Clock's running.
You guys are not funny. Wait, I almost fell off my seat. That would have been even more embarrassing. All right, hold on. All right, Journey to Cares, please. All right. May we just have the title page, please?
We will.
All right, before we go to the first slide, even the first slide, if you would like more information, please kindly see the website for the entire presentation. I just wanted to highlight only some of the amazing work that our teams in PPS are doing during this month, and some of these are not in pictures. And so I just want to give a shout out to the Students Information Office team who hosted the Kindergarten Information Night, the operations team with Bob Kuna, who met with vendors to explore document scanning, the business and finance team, who has been working hard with meeting town officials for fiscal 26 budget summit, communications team who's worked closely with the Burlington Police Department and the BPS safety team, our HR team who's worked with our new interim substitute coordinator, our information technology team, who is for the 6th year in a row, we've been awarded the 2025 Municipal Cybersecurity Awareness Grant, and our nursing team, who's planned summer curriculum protocol on the medication administration procedures and practices. And now for our slides. In slide 1, ding, as you can see, hosted 16 educators from the International School in Beijing who visited Francis Wyman Elementary School, the BH Science Center, and the BECC. Family Math Night in all 4 elementary schools was a huge success. More than 150 families came out to engage in geometry activities. Again, want to thank also Wendy Palvacek and also Sean Musselman of the Burlington Science Center, who attended the Burlington Civic Expo. There's also a picture there of us attending, Dr. Conti and me, the Massachusetts Superintendent's Association midwinter meeting to learn more about the cell phone policy and immigration laws. And thank you to the parents involved with hosting the K night. Thank you also to Mr. Jeremy for participating in our tabletop exercises with the district school safety team. Next, in slide 2. We attended site visits for literacy adoption in Hamilton, Wenham. We had a visit from Secretary Tutwiler to learn more about implementation of our social emotional curriculum and Wavefinder, both Memorial and Marshall Simons. Next, please. And slide 3. Congratulations to the BHS Technology Innovation Center Career Pathway led by Shireen Tyrell was highlighted at the governor's state speech. Former BHS student Harris Mancana was recognized during the event for the outstanding participation in the Pathway program, and congratulations to our students as well for winning their particular award, and to Leroy Wong. The next slide, please. Congratulations again, and thank you to our English learner education team for making global connections that have begun to form between students in our BHS elementary schools and students attending Cultural Connect Academy in Guatemala. Next slide, please. Again, the Burlington Science Center, thanks again to Sean Musselman and also to Wendy Palvacek for their Forces in Motion auditorium program underway at all of the elementary schools. And in our final slide, we want to thank celebrating the Lunar New Year and the Club Cadets and the Barnyard Buddies of BECC, and learning that on February 5th, Dr. Conti's age ranges somewhere between 3 years old to 226 years old, and the average of his age is 42 years old.
You did it.
Good trick.
You still had a minute and 13 minutes to spare.
All right, any questions? Guess not. Well, thank you for all of those presentations, Dr. Chen. We can move on to discussion of the draft school calendar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, draft is the key word here. There's a first and a second reading. This is just really about start date and end date and winter break date. This is not connected yet to the conversation that we had about sort of daily schedule. And that's something that we're going to be following up with later on in the meeting. I do want to thank the Joint Labor Management Team, who we did get input from teachers on the schedule. Having winter break and the Christmas holiday falling on a Wednesday or Thursday midweek does present us some options. So we've obviously went through two or three different versions of the draft. So what you see in front of you ended up being called Draft 1A, but this brings all staff back on August 25th, which is a Monday. This has the first day for grades 1 through 12 being Wednesday, August 27th. And then we would have pre-K and K starting on Thursday, September 4th. The blue days, I tried to leave a color copy at your table. You see the blue days are the professional development or parent conference days. This has winter break starting on Friday the 19th. And then bringing teachers back on January 2nd for a PD day on Friday. That would give families a full 2 weeks off for winter break. And this has the end date being, with no snow days, June 17th. It gives us sort of 1 day of flexibility prior to Juneteenth, which falls on a Friday next year. One thing that I want to point out, because we not only got feedback from the Joint Labor Management Team, but we also got student feedback, and Adi Dash, who's a senior from the South Asian Student Group, came and presented
He's the president.
To Lisa and me about, and he presented with data about the importance of a Diwali celebration and asked if we could move the parent conference day and PD day till October 20th, which is, we had a day right around there anyway, and that's when that date fell. So talked to the principals, and so it's not technically a day off. This is still a secular calendar that's in front of you, but we did move our already scheduled PD day and parent conference day to October 20th. And then, obviously, this calendar does not have Good Friday in it. We could certainly add Good Friday back in if we want to for a second reading, and that would push the last day of school till June 18th, which would be a Thursday. So that's sort of the skeleton of the calendar for planning purposes. Again, this is a first reading, but certainly be open to suggestions, and then can take any of your suggestions back and move forward.
Okay, Megan.
Has the committee, or the group that put this together, given any thought to starting school on September 2nd for students, bringing students back on September 2nd after Labor Day?
Again, that was one of the versions that we looked at, and that just pushed the end of the year for us. One of the versions, Mr. Wojcik had us actually, we could technically come to school on the 22nd and the 23rd of December. Bob, would he have to be out the 23rd? I'm just trying to think.
We gotta see when it falls on the calendar.
No, I think we could attend the 23rd, Sean. Wasn't that one of the versions?
Yes.
So we
Yeah,
could
we could attend the
do the
23rd.
22nd, 23rd,
Yeah.
and then we could probably bring staff back then on the 27th, 28th, and then bring students back on the 2nd and on the 3rd. But the consensus was that people would rather have start a couple days before Labor Day to try to get the days in because of the winter break. But again, if you certainly want to suggest that change, there's a version that we had that looked at that.
I would be interested in seeing it. I've had a few families reach out and ask me, hey, are we going to start later this year? Looked at this calendar and said, I think it'd be wise to start on the 2nd instead of starting in August. And I think that's been something that's been talked about for a few years, right? That families are saying, well, why don't we start after Labor Day? Why don't we start after Labor Day? We're starting in August. And then I think the last day would be the 17th. So if we have 2 snow days, then we're already into the following week in June. So I think it's something we should consider and look at.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of the committee feels. Maybe it's just me.
Anyone else want to speak up?
I think with the risk we're taking this year already with snow days, that I don't think most parents want to risk going into June. I think more folks that I speak to would rather go back in August than to the end of June.
I had a interaction this morning with one of your friends, Megan, who asked me why we couldn't go back the full week in August and not have the Friday off. In other words, start the kids on the 25th.
Again, Ms. Monaco, I'm sorry.
I get it. You don't have to explain it to me, but that was what she was proposing. I would also request that we have a version of the calendar with Good Friday off.
Okay.
We can vote on it and see how the votes fall, but I would like that option.
Of course.
Anyone else?
I was just going to bring up Good Friday as well, so.
So for next meeting and for second reading, I'll bring a version where we start on September 2nd and a version that basically is 1A with Good Friday added back in. And that just is going to push the last day. I mean, there's no secret here. So we'll just count the number of days. That gives us 180 days, obviously, for students. And the rest of the days that we have for our professional development, parent conferences, and everything else.
Okay.
All right, one question. You had mentioned the 22nd and 23rd of December. So if the kids went on those 2 days, and
We could certainly back off that way if we start before Labor Day. Again, I was sort of responding to Ms. Novoychek about one of the options we looked at was to bring the kids back September 2nd, because if Labor Day falls on September 7th really late, it's really hard for us to start after Labor Day. So this would be the option where you're saying we could start after Labor Day because Labor Day is September 1st. So it would be an opportunity, and it's really not about starting before or after Labor Day, it's really when Labor Day falls. So again, this year would be one of those years. My suggestion, Ms. Bond, was if we do come back, then to not add those 2 days at the end of the year. One of the versions was for us to come back to school the 22nd and the 23rd of December, is one of those days. So
I don't understand why you're even considering having those 2 days off. Most parents really want their kids in school those 2 days.
This year, we saw lots of illness, and the sort of the on-ramp towards the winter holiday was something, again, that staff really appreciated. So I can certainly do a community survey if that's what you'd like to do. Again, there's only so many ways to slice 180 days. And what happens when Christmas, again, part of winter break, falls on either a Monday or a Friday, that sort of break gets really condensed as well. We just happen to have a very early Labor Day and a Christmas Day on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So that's sort of the factors that we can't control, and that's sort of the cause here.
I would love to see a survey. I know we still have some schools without air conditioning for another couple years, so June is really hard for me to stomach. But I think there's different consensus. I know folks like opportunities to travel around the December holidays. And I think August is just as hard to find childcare for as, the December days too. So I think you're gonna find a gamut. I am really curious what people think about Good Friday. I've heard nothing but please have school on Good Friday to save us at the end of the year. But I think a community survey might be worthwhile.
Yeah, we were talking about putting a thought exchange out with a bunch of different religious holidays. As I've said, I think it's important for me to present a secular holiday, and you all can do that. And just for everyone to keep perspective, what we end up talking about is sort of 2 or 3 days, no matter how we slice it. This wouldn't be a major sort of change. We have to get 180 days in, so that's sort of what we need to do. If we start September 2nd or August 27th, or we go the 22nd and 23rd of December. Again, all we're doing is really talking about a couple days and what that adjustment would be, but we can put that out to parents. It's really not going to be a major change, but I think people want to know when they're starting and sort of when they're ending and when the breaks are. So that's kind of what the purpose of this exercise. But I certainly want to get your feedback on that. But students have seen this, staff have seen this, and you guys are seeing it now, and it's being unveiled at this point. So we'll try to get a survey out before the next, meeting.
Madam Chair, so my only comment would be, if we're going forward with the no Good Friday, I just want to know what the staffing mitigation plan is, right? Because that's why we've run into this problem before.
Right.
So to be comfortable voting on a calendar like this, I'd need to know the staffing mitigation plan, because again, if 75% of the staff is going to take a day off, it becomes very challenging to hold school that day, right?
No doubt, yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to understand that. If we do it, again, I'm completely open to it. I just want to understand the staffing plan.
Yes, sir.
The problem I see with it is we know that a lot of teachers will be out, so it's really kind of a wasted day of learning for the kids, and I don't think they have enough days of learning as it is, so I don't like to waste one. I think it should be a day off.
So wait for families to plan, too.
Yeah.
Know that it's going to be off, and they can plan ahead as opposed to finding out a few days in advance, which has been historic.
Yeah, exactly.
All is that true? And again, this year, one of the mitigating factors is Good Friday also abuts April break. So not that people wouldn't take it for non-religious reasons, but I'm saying I think there also, it may exacerbate the problem a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So it's something we should certainly look at. So.
And you really, I don't know, I think we should think a lot about whether or not we want 2 solid weeks in the winter break. That seems like I mean, people I know want their kids to go back to school, like the day after Christmas, they're ready. So
What's
2
the
solid
teacher-
weeks is a lot.
Maybe, I mean, it sounds like that's what the teachers want, so I'd be curious, like, we could also run into teachers with sick kids and staffing problems on those days too, so
Yep.
there's obviously a reason the teachers wanted that.
And I think where the Christmas holiday falls, and I know I'm being Christmas-centric, but that's the holiday that
That's
we're
what's-
talking about.
right.
So I would say, Ms. Massardo, every 5 or 6 years, Christmas sort of moves down the week, and so we don't really have any opportunity to have a full 2 weeks off other than this year. So next year, when it's on a Friday, we won't have that opportunity. So this isn't really a choice. It just
I'm fine
kind of
with
works. It kind of works in the options that we have. And again, if we're going to argue about sort of days before break or whatever, we run into that problem now a lot. So of the 180 days, we hope to get as many high-quality days that we can. And I think I've said this for now 17 years. A lot of these decisions are local, and we'll present different models to you. And I was working in Wisconsin, the first day of deer hunting season was no school because high levels of absenteeism of faculty and of kids. So if that's a local value, we can express whatever local values you want. We just have to get in 180.
Yeah, if we had, yeah, okay.
Okay?
Yep, talk about it.
So again, we'll present a couple options to you. We'll try to get a survey out, and we'll talk about what we're going to possibly do if we have, whatever, we have 100 folks out.
The thought exchange thing, I don't think is a good way to survey parents, because one person can log in repeatedly. On the thought exchange, yes.
My understanding is we can limit the amount of times people can log in.
Well, you haven't, as of yet. The high school thought exchange, you could log in as many times as you wanted.
Okay.
So I think what you really want, if you want to survey people, is you want one answer from a lot of people, not 10 answers.
Yeah, 100%. So we can look at that, and again, I'll make sure we design a decent survey. I think the tool, what's great about the thought exchange is people can provide more of an open response, and the software can respond to that, so we can actually read that. And so, again, we'll make sure you have the information from the people who respond and how many people respond, and we can go from there. So, like I said, there's no perfect calendar, there's no perfect schedule. We just need to have 180 days.
Okay, finance report, facilities and finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, you have the finance report in front of you. Ms. Kasha did connect with me from her vacation. There was no area that she felt had concerns about, and you can see the numbers. We're a little over halfway through the fiscal year, and I think she feels like we're in a sort of a place that we're expected and where we should be. But again, if anyone has any specific questions, if I can't answer them, then I can have her follow up at the next meeting.
Any questions?
I did have one question, and I think we've asked them before. I can't necessarily remember the answer, but there's like $60,000 in painting from 2018 and 2019. Are we slowly painting, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So it really just depends on the projects, and obviously painting during the school year is a little bit difficult, so vacations and summers and
But
stuff
it's been
is where.
7 years.
Yeah, so what had happened is if I can through the chair, for years it was a practice to kind of request that frequently, year after year, in order to sustain that. And then those got consolidated to kind of get away from that practice. So that's why we're kind of looking at some of those old ones, and they're kind of trickling away, but we just haven't turned them back in yet.
Yeah, towards the end of the year, if you have some that you think need to be turned back in. Any other questions? I noticed some of these, the the balances, the percent expended, some of them are like 100%. Does that just mean all the money gets spent at once and you don't need any more for the year?
Yeah, it could have been encumbered all at once, and we're just either, it was an expense that was early on for supplies that I would expect not to make sure we have for the year, but if there's anyone in particular,
No.
I can certainly answer that for you.
I just wanted to know if that was the idea behind it. Does anyone else, any questions on this Ways and Means? No. Okay. Next item is Fox Hills School Building Committee update. Do you have any update?
Quick one is that the current plans are at the cost estimators, so we will have a cost estimate. There's still one more cost estimate to go after this, but we will have it by the end of February of basically how we're doing on our building against the budget.
Okay. BHS, Catherine?
Yep, tomorrow is the community forum right here at the high school in the auditorium. We have tours starting at 5:30. We do have 10 students who volunteered to show people around the building, so I want to thank those 10 students who hopefully volunteered, weren't volunteered on their own by someone else, but anyway, I want to thank them. So anyway, the tours start at 5:30, the meeting starts in the auditorium at 6:30. Thursday, we have our regular BHS Building Committee meeting. I just want to point out that it starts at 7 o'clock, not 6:30. So for those of you who attend regularly, just don't show up half an hour early online and get disappointed. So it's 7 p.m., not 6:30. And then, again, I highly recommend before attending the meeting tomorrow or even on Thursday to go to the bhsbuildingproject.com site and, look things up on your own in terms of what's going on with the project so that you can come in, prepared with questions if you come tomorrow and have accurate information.
Dr. Conti, do you have any input on those two items?
No, please participate, is what I would say, is in the high school. And one thing I heard, we can't start at the beginning every single public meeting we have because we're sort of 14 months into the project. So the website there is as a repository of information, and if people have questions or whatever, we'll answer them as certainly as we can. But we're not, the forum isn't about starting from day one again.
Okay. Next item is facilities update. Bobby?
Nothing new to add.
Transportation update?
Similar. I'm keeping fingers crossed, but I think we're doing well right now.
Okay. Anyone have any new or old business to bring to the committee? Okay. Then we do have need for executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school district and the chair so declares, about the BEA union contract and approval of executive session minutes. Is there, well, first of all, we will return to open session only for purposes of adjournment. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Jeremy?
Aye.
Megan?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Catherine? Chair votes aye. And we are in executive session.